Channel open. Welcome back to WeeklyTrek, a proud member of the Tricorder Transmissions podcast network and presented in partnership with TrekCore.com. I am your host, Alex Perry.
What's today's date? The date.
Today's show was recorded on February 19th, 2021, and is current through Star Trek Discovery Season 3, so beware of spoilers. All right, let's get into the show.
Good day, Voyager, and welcome to A Briefing with Neelix. It's a catchy title, isn't it?
WeeklyTrek is a 30-minute news show covering the biggest stories from the Star Trek franchise. We are in a new golden age of Star Trek. There are 6 television shows in production, possibly more on the way, and enough merchandise to fill the Bajoran wormhole. So stick with me, and I'll help you sort the real facts from a lot of the Dominion propaganda that you'll find online. But I can't do this alone. And my guest this week is returning guest, Thad Haight. Thad, welcome back to WeeklyTrek.
I'm happy to be here.
All right, Thad, you know the drill. I want to know something that's got you feeling good about Star Trek at the moment. What's got you moving at Warp 10?
The fact that Picard and Strange New Worlds are both in production.
That is a pretty good reason to be feeling good about Star Trek, yes.
I mean, because we were really spoiled last year with all the new Star Trek that we got. And we've got a ways to wait this year because of COVID delays, but the fact that there's new Star Trek that's in production, and that means within the year we'll have more.
Yeah, it's obviously, I mean, these are top 2 stories this week. There'd been no official announcements yet about either of them, but we know they're happening, so yeah, we're just going to talk about them. And it is obviously fabulous that Star Trek, in addition to Discovery Season 4 that's filming in Toronto, that now...
Yeah, but we already knew about that one.
Right. We have Picard in production. We have Strange New Worlds. Either it started yesterday or it starts on Monday, whichever production publication you look at. And so it means that while 2021 is going to be a dry year, 2022 almost certainly will not be, because we should have, at the very least by 2022, Season 4 of Star Trek Discovery, Season 2 of Star Trek Picard, and Season 1 of Strange New Worlds ready to go. Mm-hmm. It also means that by the time we hit like San Diego Comic-Con this year, we could get 3 trailers for each of those shows, because that's July. And if Picard and Strange New Worlds begin filming now, I mean, they should be most of the way done with the season, if not done with filming the season by then. So there should be plenty of footage for them to work with to whet our appetite with trailers. So yeah, I've sort of been waiting for this moment.
And isn't there still one show that we don't actually know anything about yet?
Correct, there is. So when at the 7th show that Alex Kurtzman said, when he told TrekCore last year that there were 2 shows that had not yet been announced, one of which ended up being Strange New Worlds, and one which was not the Section 31 show, because he specifically said it was not the Section 31 show since that one had already been announced. But that, yeah, there is one more.
Still confused about the Section 31 show, like why they announced it so early.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some story behind that we will find out eventually. All right, well, there's plenty for us to talk about there, which we'll get into when we get into the news. But the thing I'm feeling good about this week is the Deep Space Nine illustrated handbook was released by Hero Collector.
Oh, yeah.
It's the latest in a line of glossy books that they've done. They've done one on the original Enterprise. They've done one on the Enterprise D. They've now done the Deep Space Nine one. They have a Voyager one. And they're great books. But the thing that I really love about them is, in addition to being fabulous new books, there's also a lot of nostalgia connected to them, because they...
Oh, those fact files.
That's right. They heavily reuse graphics that I remember growing up, because they were in the Star Trek Fact Files, which was a part work subscription that you put in these big 3-ring binders. Many of them, for US listeners, appeared in the 2000s version of the Star Trek magazine.
I have every issue.
Yeah, that's where those showed up. And now they are sort of canonized forever as part of these nice hardback books, which is great, because I have all the fact files, but they are sitting in cardboard boxes in my parents' garage, because there are like 16 of these giant 3-ring binders that are just full of these pages of Star Trek information. So it's nice to have sort of and these graphics, which are sort of illustrations and diagrams of the ships and the rooms in the ships particularly, or in this case, the rooms on the station, were...
Oh, I love them.
Yeah, the absolute highlight of both of those two previous projects where they were used in, so I'm really glad.
The versions of the Star Trek the magazine that I have now are not the ones I had when I was younger, because I bought a whole set a couple years ago on eBay, but the ones I had when I was younger, I cut those things out because they were fold out things in the like centerfolds, basically. And I cut them out and I would put them up on the wall in my bedroom, and yeah, I was a huge nerd. Live
it proud, man. Live it proud. All right, well, with that, let's turn to the week's top stories.
There's a war going on, and I'm a reporter.
Yeah, so as we were just talking about, good news, Star Trek fans, Star Trek Picard Season 2 has started production. As confirmed by tweets from series showrunner Terry Matalas and series star Michelle Hurd, who plays Raffi, Star Trek Picard Season 2 entered production this week, 8 months after its original shoot date. Initially scheduled to go before the cameras in June of last year, filming on Picard's second season was pushed back due to the COVID-19 pandemic. First, it was going to be fall, then it was going to be January, then it was February 1st, but we need wait no longer and speculate no longer, as Wednesday was Picard's first day of production. The first of many, Terry Matalas said in his tweet, though he later took that down because an official announcement may be coming soon. But Michelle Hurd slipped a post past CBS with an image of a leather-bound script holder, face mask, and a placard with her name and character name, with the caption, "Back to work and feels so good." Hopefully, we may hear more details about the official start for Picard Season 2 at next week's Viacom CBS investor presentation, or I guess this week, since I'm recording this on Friday, but it'll come out on Monday, and the investor presentation is Wednesday, I think. Thad, we were just talking about it. Mm-hmm. You're excited for the start of production start for Picard Season 2. What are some of the things you might think you might want to see from the second season of Star Trek Picard?
That is an interesting question, and I am really not sure. We'll see how it goes. I kind of want to see the return of a villain from previous Star Trek, because we've had plenty of other people to help Picard along the way, but I'd like to see like the return of an antagonist. I mean, ideally, the one that I'd love to see back we can't have would be Tomalak, but maybe Sela, something like that, or just the return of some sort of antagonist from the TNG era. I think would work really well, even if they're not the main bad guy, just to have them there.
Yeah, well, I mean, we haven't covered this on the show, but there was a Trek movie story about a cameo, the buy from a actor a short video with whatever message you want. There was a cameo from John Delancey, who, did some Christmas message for somebody and indicated that we maybe had not seen the last of Q. Obviously, he showed up in Star Trek Lower Decks for a brief cameo, but it was not clear to me whether that cameo was filmed either before Lower Decks or after, and so that's why I didn't cover it. But it certainly creates the possibility that perhaps John Delancey might be reappearing as Q somewhere, and maybe that could be in Picard Season 2.
Yeah, and they could easily make because Q would always wear the uniform of whoever he was antagonizing. They could easily make a throwaway comment about how he looks old because Picard looks old.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think that's an issue at all. I mean, because we saw in All Good Things when he appears to old Picard in the future timeline, he does appear to him as an old man and not as the younger man. So I think, absolutely, that's exactly the kind of stuff that Q would do. But yeah, I also would love, I mean, obviously, given the Romulan connection, yes, as you say, dearly departed Andreas Katsoulis. I am in the middle of a Babylon 5 rewatch right now and just continue to be blown away by his acting ability, and sad that we didn't get more of him in Star Trek beyond his appearances in Next Generation and then the one appearance he had in Enterprise. We really did not get a massive amount of him, but I would love for Denise Crosby to make a return as Sela. I think that would be very appropriate for, the sort of Romulan subplot that they have going on the show. The one thing that's not clear to me, though, and that's why I would really like an official announcement, the Instagram picture that Michelle Hurd put up, I was looking at it today and I was typing out my little script for this, and I wrote filming everywhere, and then I changed it to production just because that picture with the leather script holder, there's a little placard on top of it that's got her character name and her name on it. And that to me smacked of table read, not of actually filming in front of the camera. But the Terry Matalas tweet had the little camera emoji, which makes me think that filming had started. So I'm sure we will get an official announcement, and I bet it's coming Wednesday.
They can't possibly do table reads long before they would do filming, though.
Right. I mean, I think they're like, no, I mean, I think they're going to be right next to each other. It's just a question of like, are they actually rolling film on a sound? Like, have they filmed any scenes yet? Or are they still kind of like doing a lot of that pre-prep stuff before they start doing that maybe next week or the week after? I mean, I'm not saying that they're not in production. They're definitely in production. It's just a case of like, are there now, well, in the old days, film reels with Sir Patrick Stewart being Jean-Luc Picard in them again? Or are we still sort of in that kind of startup?
Well, yeah, because I'm just thinking of in the old days, they would like get the script like the day before. Obviously, it's probably it's not quite like that anymore because they're not writing 26 episodes a season for anything like that. But
well, and you'd also hope not, because they've had now a year and 2 months to write these scripts. So I hope they're the best scripts that have ever been written.
But I also feel like they surely wouldn't do a table read more than a week before they would start filming.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And that's why I say it's like a matter of days, right? So that's why I mean, ultimately we're reading the tea leaves here, but I am very excited for an official announcement to be forthcoming.
Well, I mean, we have even less confirmation of Strange New Worlds.
Oh, well, speaking of which... And if a start of production for Star Trek Picard Season 2 was not exciting enough, cameras also appear poised to roll imminently on the first season of Star Trek Strange New Worlds up in Toronto, Canada. Over the last several weeks, social media posts have confirmed that series stars Anson Mount, Rebecca Romaine, and Ethan Peck are all now in Toronto. In addition, Canadian film industry publications show Strange New Worlds as having a start date that's pretty much right around now. One source had it as Thursday, February the 18th, another as Monday, February the 22nd. Again, I think this is another one where we'll hear more about it at next week's Viacom CBS Investors event, but let's not elide over the fact, as we were talking about at the front, and I want to dwell on again, that 3 live-action Star Trek shows are either now or imminently filming, and 2 animated shows are in production. So while this might be a dry year for live-action Star Trek, 2022 is shaping up to be very, 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 very good indeed.
It's also a historic moment. 3 live-action Star Trek shows have never been in production at the same time before.
That is a great point. And certainly 5 Star Trek productions have never been going at the same time, which is what we have right now when you add the 2 animated shows together.
Yeah.
So, Thad, shifting gears to Strange New Worlds, what do you think you're most looking forward to from that show?
I mean, just the return of Captain Pike. I'll be honest, Anson Mount as Pike was my favorite thing in season 2 of Discovery, and I think he's going to be continue to be awesome in Strange New Worlds.
And we know that COVID is obviously having a big impact on these productions, right? They're filming, but they're in a bubble, and there are clearly all these health and safety precautions they're taking. What do you think in terms of like, for Discovery Season 4, for Picard Season 2, for Strange New World Season 1, like, what are you thinking or anticipating around once that show hits the screens? Are we going to come away from it with a very clear sense that, like, this was filmed in the middle of COVID? Like
I
what do you
doubt
think
it.
it's going to look like?
Because, I mean, there are some television shows that are putting that into the script, but because Star Trek is set in the future, I doubt we're going to see any indication at all, because they're not going to be the way they have it set up where they're, completely in a bubble for the production. And the Discovery actors have talked about this. It's not like they're going to be wearing masks on screen or anything like that. I don't think, as far as the end product, I don't think it's going to look any different than it would have if it was made 2 years ago.
I think we will see at least one change, though, which is I don't think we're going to get any like big crowd scenes.
That's a fair point.
Like, I think the number of extras and guest stars is probably going to be really low throughout all 3 of these seasons, because they just don't want to bring in.
Yeah, I hadn't considered that. You're right. So we won't get scenes like we got in Picard when he went to Starfleet headquarters and he walked through all those people. Yeah, we won't have anything like that. But I don't think that's going to really hurt the tone of the show in any way.
Yeah, I mean, Star Trek, for being as kind of big scope as it is, it often has relied upon very heavily intimate scenes between 2, 3, 4 people. And you can definitely do that, in a COVID filming environment. Yeah, I think it's going to be that. I think we're going to see a lot more ship stuff, right? Like, I don't think we're going to see a ton of...
You won't hear me complaining about that.
No, I love the ship shows because then they can do it all on the sets and control who comes in and out rather than being out and about, on the, like, there's going to be no Iceland shoots.
My only caveat, if they're doing more ship shows, is show us more than one class of ship, please.
Yes, indeed. Okay, well, here is a kind of fun, but also a strange story. We have our first bit of news about Star Trek Prodigy after the announcement that Kate Mulgrew was returning to Star Trek as Captain Janeway, and it involves the return of another beloved character from the Star Trek canon. Just kidding, it's the outrageous Okona. Actor Billy Campbell, who played the roguish rapscallion Thadium Okona. I promise I didn't ask you on here, Thad, just purposefully, because this was one of our stories this week. In the second season, Star Trek The Next Generation episode, The Outrageous Okona, revealed on the podcast Comic Book Central that he has recorded a voice role for the upcoming Star Trek Prodigy. In a reveal that was obviously not sanctioned by CBS, and I bet they wish they could scrub from the internet, Campbell said, I recently just signed on. I think it's on Nickelodeon or somewhere. They're doing something called Star Trek Prodigy. And it's animated, it's a comedy, it's an animated series, and they're bringing back some characters from the Star Trek universe that are heritage characters. So my guy is coming back from the outrageous Okona, and it's hilarious. Campbell went on to say that it's super funny. I come on basically too, and I'm kind of schleppy and roguish, but just kind of in a disgusting way. And whoever the female character is just sort of goes over the moon for me, much to the chagrin of the lead male character. Well, Thad, we've got Thad Okona back in Star Trek. How are you feeling about that?
Okay, so first off, I am extremely skeptical that he has his shows correct.
You think he might be appearing in Lower Decks?
It sounds like Lower Decks to me. You know, the comedy show with legacy characters, and also that feels like an episode of Lower Decks. I could totally see Mariner and Okona having a thing and Boimler being all annoyed about it.
It's just so funny. I mean, for those eagle-eyed people who watch Star Trek news religiously, you will know that this is not the first actor from a season 2 episode of Star Trek The Next Generation who has revealed on some podcast nobody has ever heard of that they are doing a reprise role in one of the animated shows.
Yes.
I'm not going to name who the other person was. It was out on the internet for a hot second. If you hop over to her Facebook page, it's still up there, even though CBS did their best to scrub the rest of the news
CBS
from
tried
the internet.
hard on that one.
Yeah. So this is our second season 2 TNG character where the actor says they've done a voice role. But yeah, it is funny. I mean, I think the outlets that have reported on it have sort of taken him at his word because he says Prodigy, that it's Prodigy. But that kind of like female lead and male lead thing, that has a real Mariner Boimler vibe to me.
Right.
But it could also just be the case that it is Prodigy and that the particular episode he was in was a comedic episode because it's got Thadium Okona in it.
That's
and maybe
also
the rest
possible.
of the show, you know, it's just their sort of flavor of the week episode rather than the show itself as a comedy.
That's also entirely possible. I'm just saying this sounds a lot like Lower Decks to me.
And I thought that too, and I tweeted about it. I was like, does anybody else feel like they're getting a real Lower Decks vibe off of this comment? But then I was also thinking about it too, and I was like, well, I mean, what do we know about Prodigy, right? I'm going to say it again for the 1,000th time, because it's the only thing we know about it other than Kate Mulgrew is in it. A group of lawless teens finds a starship and uses that starship to find hope, meaning, and whatever the hell it is they're going to do. A group of lawless teens. I mean, who better for them to encounter than one Thadium Okona? I can't believe he's coming back to Star Trek. I'm still just boggled. It just boggles
could
my
be
mind.
worse. It could be Joe Piscopo's character from that episode.
Yeah, I suppose we're looking on the bright side. Well, the funny thing is, in the rest of the interview, Campbell talks about how embarrassed he is by his portrayal of Okona, that he was way in over his head, and if there was one performance he'd ever made that he wishes in his career he could go back and scrub from history, it's the Okona character. And so he liked the idea of coming back to Star Trek because it gave him an opportunity to redeem himself in that regard. But boy, this is just such a strange one. Part of me thinks that maybe he is wrong about it, and that is why CBS haven't gone to the mat to try and get this information.
Well, that
scrubbed.
could be, because it also just feels like a very Lower Decks thing to reference an infamously bad TNG episode,
Sure.
because they've done so many infamously bad Star Trek episode references already.
Yep. And it's also the kind of reference that I actually would expect, given that David Mack, the Star Trek author, was a consultant on both Lower Decks and Prodigy, so this could apply equally to both. And in his last Next Generation book in the Star Trek sort of literary continuity, he did feature Okona as a character.
That actually worked really well.
Yeah, he'd become a Starfleet intelligence operative, and that was now his gig. I mean, he was still the same roguish rapscallion that he had been before, but now he was a Starfleet intelligence rapscallion rather than a privateer.
And in the long tradition of the Star Trek novel verse, every character that he interacts with in his intelligence, all of his intelligence colleagues were also people we had seen before.
Of course, one of them was Naomi Wildman. Why wouldn't it be Naomi Wildman? So Star Trek Prodigy is announced. We get the logo. Kate Mulgrew, oh my God, coming back as Captain Janeway. And right up behind it, the next thing we learn about what is probably going to be the next show to drop is Billy Campbell, Thaddeus O'Connor, back in Star Trek Prodigy. I have a prediction that Star Trek Prodigy is going to be one of the featured announcements for next Wednesday. So I will hold that for the end. But just know we will return to discussing this.
Do you think it might be a launch series for Paramount Plus?
That would be cool. I think it's probably a little close because March the 4th now is.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering. Yeah, you'd think they would have built buzz for it, but I'm wondering if I don't know.
My guess is it's probably more like an April-May show.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Which is still very close to being at the beginning of Paramount Plus.
Well, I'm glad Paramount Plus is launching before it comes out because it means that I don't have to pay additional money to watch it somewhere other than Paramount Plus.
We hope, right? I mean, we don't know for sure yet that it's definitely going to be on Paramount Plus. We know it's going to be on Nickelodeon for sure.
And they have said that Nickelodeon content is on Paramount Plus, but I suppose that doesn't necessarily mean that brand new episodes and new shows will be there immediately.
Correct. I think for CBS shows, that has been the case for CBS All Access, that they show up 24 hours after they're on the network. But Paramount Plus is, it could be its own thing, so we don't necessarily know that that's true yet. Well, lastly this week, Simon & Schuster have revealed titles and blurbs for 3 upcoming Star Trek novels. On May 18th, this year, Star Trek Discovery Wonderlands by Una McCormack will be released and will cover Michael Burnham's year alone in the future before she reunited with the crew of Discovery. Then, on June 15th, Christopher L. Bennett returns to the original series movie era with a book about Admiral Kirk's tenure as the Commandant of Starfleet Academy. And finally, on July 13th, we get our first Star Trek The Next Generation novel set during the series run in almost 20 years. Shadows Have Offended by Star Trek newcomer Cassandra Rose Clark will provide starring roles for Counselor Troy and Dr. Crusher. After a bit of a drought in Star Trek books, there are none on the schedule between January's The Dark Veil by James Swallow and the June novel, The Star Trek Discovery book by Una McCormack. We do actually return to monthly releases until the end of 2021, though no details are available on the books scheduled to be published after Shadows Have Offended yet. Thad, do you think you'll be picking up 1, 2, or all 3 of these books?
I mean, all 3, always. Assuming, because the announcement doesn't officially say, but I'm assuming that these are all going to have day 1 audiobook releases as well, because that's been the standard lately.
That has been the case for the last couple of years. I would assume it will be here too.
So, I mean, I always get the audiobook for the new books. So if we're going to have monthly releases, it looks like my Audible monthly credits are just going to be all Star Trek for a while, which is perfectly fine with me. You mentioned Shadows of Offended is the first TNG era novel in a while, but Living Memory is the first TOS movie era novel in quite some time too, isn't it?
The Higher Frontier that Christopher L. Bennett published last year was set in the post motion picture period.
Okay.
And this is sort of a semi-sequel to that.
See, I own that one, but I haven't actually listened to it yet.
Oh, it's good. You should listen to it. And The Higher Frontier is sort of a semi-sequel to a book, his very first Star Trek novel, which was Ex Machina, that was published in 2001, which was itself a direct sequel to Star Trek the Motion Picture.
Yeah, no, I have read Ex Machina. I like that one.
Yeah, so Higher Frontier is like an Ex Machina sequel.
Okay.
And then this one is a sequel to Higher Frontier. It's basically, I mean, they're not sequels in the way that the stories continue between the different books. They're distinct stories, but it's the same characters and the same sort of general flow of the character arcs, taking them in between the different books. So there is sort of continuity between them, I guess, the best way of putting it.
Yeah, and I don't know, on Weekly Trek, are we allowed to talk about the mysterious books that aren't officially announced yet?
Oh, hell yes, we can.
Because those are the books I'm most excited for.
Yeah, so there's a listing for C1, C2, and C3. If you go on Amazon and you type in Star Trek and you limit it to books and then you sort them by release order, you will see these untitled books, and they'll always show up as like untitled, and then normally 3 or 4 letters. And we've sort of figured out by now it's the title of the book, the first letter of each word of the title. So like Shadows Have Offended was untitled SHO, and then once they drop the title and the blurb in, it then becomes whatever the book is. Well, there's untitled C1, untitled C2, and untitled C3, one written by Dayton Ward, one written by David Mack, and one written by James Swallow. And my very strong theory is that David Mack and Dayton Ward have talked for a couple of years now about how they were really interested in doing a wrap-up to the Star Trek literary continuity. And I very strongly suspect that that trilogy of novels, which are listed as Next Generation books, a Next Generation trilogy, is going to be that wrap-up with those 3 authors writing each of the books.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I'm very interested to see what they do. I also really hope they don't completely ignore Deep Space Nine.
I don't think they will. I think it's going to be I think they're going to try and wrap up as many of the lingering story threads from all of those stories as they can. That would be my hope anyway.
Yeah, and I'm not saying they will. It's just every book we've gotten in that continuity. We've gotten several books in that continuity over the last couple years since they started doing books again.
Yeah.
None of them have touched on DS9 at all.
Correct.
Which is interesting because there were actually 2 DS9 novels the year before they stopped writing the books for a while.
Yep.
So that's why I'm like, I really hope that we get some sort of closure on that on the DS9 story.
My hope is that's the case. I mean, we don't even know that that's what these books are yet, but I have a very strong suspicion that they are. And yeah, I'm thrilled for it. I just want them to be big, and I don't need them to I don't need it to correct the timeline so it then runs with whatever it is. I just want like a satisfying story that says, you know, we've done this for the last 20 years, right? Avatar, the first Deep Space Nine relaunch novel, came out in 2001. So it's been a 20-year journey of this kind of literary continuity that they've built. I want a big, bold, bombastic, satisfying tale that caps off that colossal 20-year achievement in a really satisfying way. It doesn't need to kind of fit into what's now the TV canon or anything like that. It just needs to feel authentically true to itself.
I want a grand, epic story done over multiple books in the, grand tradition of the Destiny trilogy, which is what I'm really hoping we're going to get.
All right. Well, we've talked about the facts, and now let's speculate on what's going to happen in the future of Star Trek.
You make some very good points, Captain. But it's still all speculation and theory.
So each week, I and my guest give you a wish or theory we're nurturing about any of the shows or the future of the franchise. So Thad, let's hear your theory or wish for this week.
Okay, so the big reason that we know that Strange New Worlds is coming is because the actors are all in Toronto.
Yes.
And we know in 2021, you can't go to Toronto unless you have legitimate business to be there.
Yes.
Jason Isaacs is in Toronto right now, too.
Interesting. I didn't see this. Tell me more.
So it was a week or two before the other ones, but one of Jason Isaacs' most recent tweets is from Toronto, and it's from within the last month. And I'm just saying, it's probably for something entirely different, but what if it isn't?
Well, there was that interesting story over the summer of last year when he was asked again about the possibility of returning to play Lorca. And he's been asked a number of times since Discovery Season 1. And every time he's been like, I would love to. It's got to be the right story. But, I'm talking to them about it. And I'd love to find a way to do it. I love being on Star Trek. It was the best. I'd love to find a way to return. And then he gets asked in July or August of last year. And he didn't say any of that. He just said, I plead the fifth, and then moved on to something else.
That is interesting. Which
did sort of, create, there were some stories at the time about is he maybe hinting that he wants to come back to Star Trek. And again, I didn't cover it at the time because it felt way too sort of weirdly speculative and not enough actual there.
Yeah. The fact that Jason Isaacs tweeted from Toronto is not in and of itself enough proof. There are a lot of productions that happen in Toronto, but it's an interesting coincidence. And if he were to return, it would make sense for it to be on Strange New Worlds.
That is a very interesting coincidence. And I would love it to be true. I mean, I would love Lorca back, whether it's Prime Lorca or Mirror Lorca. I frankly don't care. Jason Isaacs was fabulous in that role, and I would love to see him return. And I would love to see him share the screen with Anson Mount, which of course we never saw in Discovery. I would love that. I'm all in. Okay, so my theory is, because we've got this investor event coming up next Wednesday, or I guess this Wednesday for when folks are listening to it. And my theory is we're going to get a bunch of information about Star Trek Prodigy, probably the next show coming up. We know that Kate Mulgrew is returning as Janeway. We know that she's now recorded all of her season 1 stuff, and so it's sort of in the animation process at whatever point. I think we're going to find out more about who the characters are, about what the setting is, and I think we're going to get our first stills and hopefully a trailer. That's what I would really like, would be some kind of footage from this show. For Lower Decks, we didn't get that first trailer until a couple of weeks before. It's more traditional with animation. You don't kind of do the trailers sort of months in advance, but it feels like a good sweet spot of where for STLV 2 years ago, or I guess it was San Diego Comic-Con 2 years ago, they brought some stills of the characters of Lower Decks and they introduced the voice actors and they said who they were going to be playing, and that was what you got. I would like that for Prodigy, and if they're going to do that at any point, next Wednesday seems like the time to do it. If Paramount are treating this event the way that Disney treated their investor event at the end of last year.
Are we going to get like 15 new Star Trek episode announcements?
I don't think they're going to be able to go that far. But they're clearly going to, like, if it's an investor event, you got to hype these people up, right? You got to give them a reason to be excited about investing in the product. And that means you are going to have to bring flashy, cool, and interesting stuff to show. You can't just be like, Star Trek Discovery Season 3 was really great, because that's over. You've got to be forward looking. So I do think we're going to get some stuff. And my guess is the reason Terry Matalas was told to delete that tweet within 15 minutes of having sent it saying that Star Trek Picard season 2 had started filming is maybe they're going to do a little kind of sizzle reel video showing that that's filming and Strange New Worlds is filming, like they did for Discovery season 2. Do you remember? Like within a couple of days of filming started, they had a little like, we're filming again video, and it was super exciting. And you got a little shot of the sort of Discovery version of the TOS uniforms, and it built and generated that excitement. So I think maybe we're going to get something similar to that on Wednesday. But I think my hope very strongly is that we walk away from there with some really solid Prodigy info, and that's what our next episode will be about. Then will be what we learn there. What do you think about that?
I think you're probably right. There probably is going to be at least some sort of announcement,
right? Otherwise, why are you even bothering?
Right.
And you could theoretically see them doing an investors event and them announcing a bunch of stuff, but none of it is Star Trek. But they have very sort of carefully positioned Star Trek as being the crown jewel of the network.
With all those Paramount Plus ads that, heavily focused on Star Trek.
Right.
Yeah, that seems highly unlikely that they wouldn't say something about Star Trek.
Is there anything else you think is in the realm of possibility? I think the other thing, and I talked about this in last week's episode, and I still think it's true, is more Strange New Worlds casting information as well, because we know who 3 of the actors are, but like it's going to be a bigger main cast. And we don't know who any of those people are yet.
Nothing else in the realm of possibility. One big wish that I have that probably isn't going to happen, but maybe, with the final book trilogy for the Star Trek relaunch series. I mentioned how in the last 5 years, every single book has gotten a day 1 audiobook release.
Yep.
None of the ones before that from that series have. I'm hoping maybe to as a final like hurrah for the series, they'll announce that they're going to start releasing audio versions of all of the relaunch books.
Oh, that would be cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I'll be honest, I love to read, but I also don't spend a lot of time reading.
Yeah.
And I go through audiobooks way faster than physical books. So I would just love if they actually did that, I would listen to all of them and be completely caught up. There are lots of the relaunch novels I have not read because there's so freaking many of them.
They had 20 years worth. They were doing probably 4 or 5 a year, for the during the height of that period.
But anyway, I don't think it's going to happen, but I hope it does.
Do you have a theory or a wish for Discovery, Picard, Lower Decks, Strange New Worlds, or the future of the franchise that you'd like to share? Tweet them to me at WeeklyTrek or email them to me at weeklytrek@thetricordertransmissions.com, and I might feature your theory in a future episode. Well, that's all the time we've got for this episode of Weekly Trek. Thank you so much to my guest, Thad Haight, for joining me today. Thad, how can people contact you if they want to continue the conversation?
You can find me on Twitter at Tyrannicus. That's TYRANICUS.
And you can find this show on Twitter at WeeklyTrek and me at Alexander T. Perry. And if you enjoy the show, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on your podcast player of choice. And please check out some of the other great shows on the Tricorder Transmissions. And if you like our shows, please also consider becoming a Patreon of Tricorder, which you can find at patreon.com/the Tricorder Transmissions. And lastly, if you're looking for Star Trek news on the internet, I hope you will turn to trekcore.com. Well, thank you, Thad. Thank you to all of my listeners. And until next week, live long and prosper.